Pastor Charlie's wife. Now, if you guys don't know Pastor Charlie, he is the only pastor on staff with that really awesome beard. All right, you guys are going to see him tomorrow for Bible time. Now, I am taking on the next leg of our race. Miss Mackenzie handed me the baton yesterday. Now I get to share with you guys the fourth leg of Eric Little's life. And guys, this is a super exciting leg of his life because who can tell me what is that special job that Eric Little has? Yell it out. Just yell it out. Missionary. I heard it. Missionary. That's right. He's a lot of things. So if you guys said runner, athlete, you're right on that too. But he is a missionary, which is why we're studying him. But we haven't gotten to the missionary part yet, have we? No. All right, guys, we're going to do a little warm-up, okay? I'm going to ask a question. You're just going to shout at me, okay? You guys can do it?
Yes.
Oh, see, we already are failing. Okay, can you do it?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Okay, have we heard about his missions work yet? No, this is fantastic. Thank you, guys. Otherwise, I feel so lonely up here. All right, like when we're all together. Okay, so we have not yet heard about his missions work. So we're going to find out about that today. So if you remember, when Miss Mackenzie handed the baton, Eric Little had just won the Olympic gold medal. And he was a national hero in Scotland. But he was feeling like God was calling him to the mission field. Shout out if you guys can remember where he wanted to go. Yes, he wanted to go to China, back to where he was as a little boy. Okay, so he is now willing to give up the fame of being an Olympic gold medalist and the fame of being like the fastest man in Scotland to go over 5,000 miles away to China. I want to help you guys understand how far he's going away from where everybody knows and loves him, okay? If you and I were in Scotland right now, and we were going to get on an airplane and fly to China, it would take us more than an entire day. We would get on the plane now, and we would get off the plane in China at the end of Camp Compass tomorrow. That's a long time, isn't it? That's a long trip. And guys, when Eric Little was going to China, he was not taking a plane, okay? He took a boat, and then he took a super long train ride. He was traveling for weeks. But that was exactly where he wanted to be. He wanted to be in China. He wanted to willingly leave behind all these things. Even, we're going to find out, leave behind his safety in order to go and do missions work in China. Because for most, if not all of us sitting here right now, war is something we hear about, but it's not something we really know. It's something that happens far, far away from us, somewhere else. But that was not what Eric Little had experienced. He had dealt with fighting and the consequences of war since even before he was born. And he was getting ready to go back into that kind of an environment. Now, before he would reach his final destination in China, he was going to stop over at a part of China that was along the coast and take a little vacation with his family. And while he was there, he was able to meet up with some other missionary families. Most of these families he knew, but there was one family he had never met before, and they were the Mackenzie family, not to be confused with our Miss Mackenzie. And the Mackenzie family had two daughters, Margaret and Florence. Now, I want you guys to remember Florence for me because we're going to meet her in just a little bit in our story. Now, while serving as a missionary in China, Eric's job was going to be teaching at an all-boys school, like where he grew up. He was going to teach English, and he was going to teach chemistry, but he was also going to teach sports. Did Eric Little really like sports?
Yes!
Yes! Was he really good at sports?
Yes!
Yes, he was. So what a perfect teacher. But guys, these Chinese boys had a completely different upbringing than Eric did. See, when Eric was a boy, he had to play sports at his school. At this school, they weren't used to that. They weren't used to playing organized sports, and they definitely weren't used to having special uniforms for organized sports. See, every boy in the Chinese school, they wore a traditional Chinese robe, and it was like this long, almost like a dress, right? But it was masculine, and it would go all the way down to their feet. Now, if you were going to go play sports, would you wear a robe? No, that you would trip all over yourself, wouldn't you? So when Eric decided to teach these boys how to play rugby, well, he got dressed in his sports gear. He put on his sports shorts and his t-shirt, and he came out ready to go. And you know what happened? All the boys laughed at him. Now, do you want to know why they laughed? It's so silly. Because these Chinese boys had never, ever seen a white man's knees before. That was the funniest thing to them. We can't even imagine that because we all see each other's knees right now. But they were constantly covered up, and they thought it was hysterical. So for this early part of Eric's ministry, he spent the first 4 years serving right there with his family. He was actually living with his parents and Jenny and Ernest, and his big brother Robert lived really close by with his wife, and they had a baby girl. So after 4 years, when it was time for Eric's parents to take another furlough, right, this long vacation from missionary work, and go back to Scotland, Eric was feeling super lonely. For the first time, he was 27 years old now, he started to think it might be nice for him to have a family of his own. But who was he going to marry? Do you guys remember that name I told you? What was it? Florence, that's right. And all her friends called her Flo. Now, Eric noticed Flo right away. She had beautiful, long, black, curly hair. She was super fun and nice, and she liked to play practical jokes, and he just loved being around her. She was also a really strong Christian, and that made him like her even more. But there was a problem in Eric's mind. See, Eric was 27, Flo was 17. That means that she was 10 years younger than him. And you guys might be surprised to know we actually have plenty of families in our church where the husband and wife are 10 or more years apart. But the problem for Eric was that this was at a time in his life where he was a grown-up. He was living by himself, he was teaching, and Flo, she was still in school. She was finishing up her senior year, and he just felt awkward about it. So he had to come up with a plan. How is he going to spend more time with Flo without awkwardly asking her out by herself? Well, he decided he would just make friends with the entire senior class of Flow School. So he would take everybody out for tea. He would take everybody to play games with him. That was his plan. Do you think it worked?
No.
Some positive, some negative. Well, it was successful. His plan worked because he was able to spend more time with Flo. So much time with her that he decided, this is the woman I'm going to marry. But now there was another problem. See, Eric, he was too shy to propose to her. So what is he going to do? Well, after school, Flo goes off to summer vacation, and Eric starts enjoying summer vacation too. But thankfully, Eric and Flo ended up vacationing at the same spot. They were back at that place where he had first met Flo, and he was so excited because their cabins were just 2 cabins away. The whole Mackenzie family was just 2 cabins over. So now he had a new plan. Okay, he thought, I am going to be the director of all summer activities. That way, he could plan more opportunities to spend time with Flo. So that's what he did. And while they were hanging out, he found out that she wanted to go and be a nurse. And she was going to go to school where she was from for 4 years to become a nurse. Do you guys have any family that are nurses? You guys know any nurses? Yeah, a lot of us, right? Nurses are awesome. And so she was going to go do that. And he got really excited because he thought, okay, well, 17 might be a little young to get married, but when she's done with school, she'll be 21, and that sounds about right to me. So Eric finally got up enough courage, and he got down and he said, Flo, will you marry me? What do you think she said? Yes! She said yes. She actually thought he was joking. She was so excited. The Olympian, amazing Eric Little wants to marry me. He said, yes, I do. And so she said yes, and they started planning their 4-year engagement. So Flo went back so that she could go to school and become a nurse, and Eric was now ready to take his furlough in Scotland. And while he was there, he was going to become an ordained minister, which meant he'd be a pastor. He could run a church back in China. He could baptize Christians in China. And so shortly before he left, he took his exams and he passed. This was a great moment for Eric. He was excited, but at the same time, he got some really hard news. He found out that because his dad's health wasn't as good as it had been, he was not allowed to go back to do any more missionary work in China. Eric was heartbroken to know that his parents would no longer be laboring alongside of him in China. But he felt good thinking, okay, I can take the work that my father started all those years ago and continue it for him. And so that's what he was planning to do. So while he had all this steam and excitement to go, he went back to China. But just over a year later, his father suddenly died. Eric was so sad because he was all the way in China. He couldn't be at his dad's funeral. He couldn't be there to help his mom. But he knew that God had him in China for a reason. And so he set his mind to keep doing the work of the Lord. And he set his mind on something else very exciting that was coming up. Dun, 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 dun. What do you think it was? Yes, his wedding, marriage. He was so excited. And guys, when the day finally came, everybody was excited. Not just Flo and Eric, but they had become a very popular couple. And lots of people came to watch them get married. In fact, it was such a special event that there were even front page newspaper articles the very next day from 2 different towns. Now, shortly after their wedding, even though all of this excitement was happening, there was a lot of hard things going on in China, and more talk about war was starting to come up. In fact, the school where Eric was teaching, and any school that was all boys, was being forced by the government to train their boys for military action. They had to be ready to fight. Do you think those boys were scared? Yes. But guys, can God use sad, scary things for good? Yes, and that is exactly what he did. Because what was happening is as these boys were suddenly thinking more and more about war and about death, about their own death and their lives, they started to think about God. Right there, how many gods are there, guys? One true God. And he is perfect. And we are not. We are sinners. And those boys were sinners. And they knew that they needed to repent of their sin and put their trust in Jesus Christ, his life and his death and his resurrection, to be free from sin. And so what was happening is all these Bible studies were popping up all around the school. Is that a good thing? Yes. God was using war to bring about the gospel in Eric Little's school. And something else very awesome also happened. Eric Little and Flo Little, what do you think they had? How many babies you think? 2 babies! The first year of their marriage, they had their first daughter, and the second year, they had another daughter. This was very exciting. The Littles were so happy. But shortly after the birth of their second daughter, the London Missionary Society came to Eric with a very tough decision to make. You see, Eric and his family lived in the city. And even though war was going on around them, it wasn't really in the city so much. But most of the missionaries were there in the city. And they needed some missionaries who were willing to go and travel to these outside villages where they were being bombed regularly, where soldiers were coming in and taking their food and hurting the people. These villages needed the gospel. And you know who they thought of to go? They thought of Eric, right? Because it was back in Zhaocheng, where Eric had been as a little boy. And they asked him if he wanted to go. His brother Robert was working in the hospital there, and they knew he knew the area well. But they said, there's one condition. You're not allowed to bring your family. Zhaocheng was too dangerous for the missionary society to allow any women or children to go. So Eric had a decision to make. But he prayed a lot about it, and he came to his decision. Raise your hand if you think he stayed in the city. Raise your hand if you think he went to the villages. Yeah, he did. He went to the villages. And when he got there, he knew that he needed to find an interpreter, because all these different villages spoke a slightly different variation of the Chinese language, and he needed someone who was going to help him. So he found an interpreter, and he realized, I need to teach him how to ride a bike, because he did not want to be walking long distances to all these different villages. He knew that it would be much easier for them if they could ride a bike. The problem was that, remember, these villages were being bombed regularly. So the roads all around the villages were covered in these deep potholes. It was hard to ride a bike even if you already knew how. And now he had to teach this man. Do you think he was successful in teaching him?
Yes.
Yeah, he's an Olympic athlete, right? He taught him how to ride a bike, which was great. But the problem remained, the potholes were still there. So every time that Eric and Wang Feng went out to do these evangelistic meetings, at least once on their trip, they would be thrown from their bikes. It was not uncommon for Eric to come back from one of these evangelistic visits covered in bruises. Do you think that stopped him? No, of course not. This is Eric Little. And when he knew what God wanted him to do, he did it, right? So he kept going. In fact, Eric was so good at denying himself and thinking of others that he actually caused great changes in the hospital where his brother was working. See, when Eric first got there, they were only treating injured soldiers from the Chinese army, like the guys on their side. And if they saw anybody else who needed help, well, they just left them alone because they were the enemy. But Eric didn't like that. He said, that's not right. Every single person is a soul. Every single person was born in the image of God and deserves care. And so they did change their policy. They would help anybody. And Eric would actually travel long distances to go and pick up wounded men and women from all over, risking his own life, coming through territories that were taken over by some of these bad armies just to save their lives, hoping that God would save their souls. You guys, when I think about Eric Little's life, it kind of reminds me of like an action and suspense movie, don't you think? I lost you. I'm going to ask again. We're going to do it again. It's okay. It's okay. I know you're hot. All right. When I think about Eric's life, right, it reminds me of an action and suspense movie, right? Yes. There was so much danger and excitement and all of this in the middle of a war zone, guys. But you know what's amazing is that this is not the end of Eric Little's life. Tomorrow, I'm going to pass the baton to Mrs. Hernandez. And she is going to tell you one of my favorite legs of Eric Little's life. And I want you guys to notice how many times Eric is willing to forget about his own comfort and forget about his own preference and forget about his own desires to do what brings God glory. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Day